goes for a toss, obviously the sperm production will subside. We get so many patients who are doing gym goer, who are just working out, who take exogenous steroids. They come back with testes of 4 ml, sir. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Setu, do you get sperm DNA fragmentation done in patients of severe oligoasthenospermia in your regular practice?
Not in regular practices, sir, because it doesn't really guide us to where we are going, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think.
So one more small question, Dr. Setu, are there any studies comparing the size of the penis eventually when babies are born at say late preterm 36, 35 versus some babies born at 40 weeks? Is there a difference in the penis size at 36 and versus 40 weeks?
No, so ma'am, there are studies which have found that at preterm versus term, if you compare, obviously the preterm kid is going to have a smaller penis size.
At birth, or I'm talking about eventual?
No, so eventually, ma'am, there is a catch-up growth. They will increase when the mini puberty comes in a preterm kid. It catches up for whatever deficiency was there. And if you look at 1 year data, it shows that there is hardly any difference between the preterm and the term.
Thank you.
Can we apply this thing, testosterone therapy, to normal individuals for increasing the length of normal newborn babies, for increasing the length of penis? It's a hypothetical question, not for practical application.
So I think that will be bordering on unethical practices. So I'm not
Yeah,
sure if
that's
I
what
can answer that.
practically asking whether it can be done or not.
It can be done, sir.
Yeah,
it
that is
can
what
be
I'm
done,
asking.
But
that it can be done.
bone age will go down the event. So can be done. Doesn't mean it should be done.
His
question was
it
can.
should not be done.
So
but
can
can
तो
be
सर
done.
कुछ भी कर
Yeah,
सकते हैं
yeah,
सर.
yeah.
Can का तो कोई
That
limit ही
means
नहीं है.
length can be increased. No, length can be increased in
Yes,
such
sir.
a
Yes, sir.
okay,
Yes, sir.
okay. Adverse effects are more.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much for patience.
So I request Dr. Rohit and Dr. Seema to kindly felicitate our speaker, Dr. Setu. And ladies and gentlemen, please give a huge round of applause for such a wonderful talk. Dr. Setu is a renowned endocrinologist of our area. He is working at Gangaram and also he's at his own hospital in Dilshad Garden. And what a wonderful talk it was. And I think it will definitely guide us all while we see a case of micropenis in, or OPD, a child. So most of the time these patients are distressed and they are very much worried. So I request now our panelists to call upon the next speaker.
Our next speaker is Dr. Niharika Singh. She has done MBBS MD Psychiatry from NIMHANS, Certificate course in Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, ex-program coordinator NMHS 2 NIMHANS, ex-senior resident RINPS Ranchi. Please, Dr. Niharika.
Okay. Hello, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Niharika. I'm a consultant psychiatrist. Today I have been given this interesting topic of types of pornography and their impact on addiction. So these will be my agenda. I won't be getting into much depth, but rather covering interesting topics and questions that we come across by patients and sometimes just our friends. So here is this case that I have seen. So let's say you see a patient who is 27-year-old, no chronic illnesses, no cardiovascular risk factor, yet he is struggling with erectile dysfunction. So we get his blood test done, we get his hormonal profile done, everything is fine. And he's completely clueless as to what went wrong. So we go into a conversation, and then with hesitation he admits that he watches pornography daily and he does a lot of edging, which is basically just playing around and increasing his time of orgasm so that his pleasure is increased. And he has been doing this for years. It doesn't seem like a problem until now. He realizes he can get an erection only when watching porn, but with a real partner, nothing. Panic sets in. He is going to get married, doesn't know what to do. another case that I came across, a 62-year-old man, he also didn't have any chronic illness, no cardiovascular risk factor. He entered the room with hesitancy and talked about his nicotine use for a while. His wife listened patiently for a while, and then she interrupts and she's like, talk about the real problem, no? His wife talks about his obsession with hair down there. So his wife was his first sexual partner, and she never really was hairy. So where is this coming from, his obsession with hair down there? So with hesitation, he admits that he developed a fascination for them from porn comics and now porn videos. He asked his wife to grow her pubic hair, and it was working fine, but now that she is also undergoing menopause and her hair is getting scanty, so what he does is he seeks them elsewhere. He has started looking for them outside his marriage and has spent significant money. You would not imagine looking at him. He was wearing a dhoti, very decent, applied a tilak, and it was surprising, and he himself was very embarrassed that he's doing this. His son was waiting outside. He didn't want me to tell him what he has. He just wanted to talk about nicotine, and that's all. And he has spent significant money. When I say significant, once a week he's paying somebody to just, watch hairy women. That's what he does. So now talking about rise of pornography, not long ago, access to pornography required effort. People would have to go through this embarrassing search for looking for magazines, renting adult movies, and they had to face the societal barriers. However, today it's very instant, free, and endless, and anonymous. Nobody gets to know. So there's novelty. You get new stuff with each moment, and you can keep escalating your type of porn. So 91.5% of men and 60.2% of women in the US report watching pornography. Now you may think, why is this difference between the prevalence between men and women? Not sure, but according to studies, it was mostly, they say that women have more of introspective images when they masturbate or when they get aroused, while for men, it's more of external stimuli. Now, India ranks third globally in pornography consumption, only after US and the UK. The median age of first exposure to pornography in India is 13 years, yes. Although they say that it's illegal to watch below 18 years, but is there any parental control or is there any law as such? I'm not sure. 46% of regular users report escalating to more extreme content over time. And so there was also one thing, after COVID, lockdowns and people had a lot of screen time, children had free access to their phone. So there was a dramatic spike of approximately 95% in pornography consumption. And recent studies indicate that, like I told, 14.6% of Indian medical students they have problematic porn use. Not just watching porn, they have problematic porn use. What are the factors contributing to widespread pornography consumption? I think I discussed this. It's available, it's anonymous, it's accessible. I think these are the reasons why it's there. So pornography and its types. The industry is massive, but let's just try to break it down. Mainstream pornography, violent or coercive content, fetish and niche porn, and AI-generated and VR porn. So mainstream pornography is basically more accessible. It's more available. It reinforces the stereotypes, the sexual scripts that we are told about real world intimacy, which is not actually that real. And they also show a high level of aggressive or performance-based content. We have talked a lot about how men are so worried about their masculinity. These pornography are also a huge reason why they have these unusual expectations from themselves. Now, so, you graduate. So just like alcohol, you start with using regular beer maybe, then you graduate to more hard liquor, and then the beer is not working enough for you. So similarly in pornography, they start with these mainstream pornography, which are still more than what we have in real world, which is still more, but they graduate, they go to violent and coercive content, which is aggressive, and which basically desensitize violence. They promote rape content, they promote sex against will. There is fetish and niche porn, where they talk about specific interest and potential for desensitization. So basically that means that basically some may be interested in like parts of body which are not sexual parts. So they may get interested in that, they may develop a fetish for that. And if they are just watching it, that is okay. But once it starts crossing somebody's boundary, it becomes a problem. And there is also risk for desensitization, because your fetish may not be your partner's turn on, so that may become a problem. Now we have this AI generated and VR porn, so we a lot of actors and actresses, their pictures are basically metamorphed, and people like watching these VR porns. So the problem is social learning. What we do, what we see. So basically, if we see these kind of content, there is a high risk that our sexuality, our imagination, our behavior may be shaped by these. So coming to sexual addiction. So what is there something called sexual addiction, by the way? There's none. Until now, we use this terminology, but ICD or DSM, they don't really have been using this particular term, although we are reaching there. So just a little bit of history. Krafft-Ebing described the first case of abnormally increased sexual desire in Western Europe. And then Kinsey and colleagues, they developed the concept of total sexual outlet. They tried to measure how much of sex, any kind of sex, masturbation or intercourse is okay, which is again which is again a concept that we get a lot of questions around. I get being asked by my patients, so how much of masturbation is normal? How much can I do in a week? I mean, we can't really prescribe that, you do it twice a day. We can't really say that. So although this was used once upon a time, but now we know that there is no such thing. There is no exact number as to this much is okay and this much is not. So just the history of ICD, how sexual addiction came into figure. As we can see, ICD-11 is the latest, and we still don't have the sexual addiction term. Rather, they call it compulsive sexual behavior disorder. They think of it as more of compulsion, more like something that we do to remove negative valence. DSM-5, they had interest into sexual addiction and the concept of sexual addiction. Rather than compulsion, they wanted to classify it under addiction. This was proposed by Kafka. However, this was not approved. So maybe in next DSM, but still DSM-5 does not call it addiction. So what is this OCD versus impulse control versus addiction debate? So let me just tell you what is addiction according to American Society of Addiction Medicine. Primary, chronic disease of brain, reward, motivation, and memory-related circuitry. So it has to be primary. It should not be because you had a trauma and now you have hypofrontality. So it should be primary. It should not be because of some organic causes. It should be chronic, at least 6 months. And it should have caused some damage in your brain, reward, motivation, and memory circuit, which are very much related again. Dysfunction in these circuits leads to characteristic biological, psychological, social, and spiritual manifestations. This is also reflected in an individual pursuing reward. And this similar thing is also how we describe and how we understand substance use as. So finally, at a behavioral level, addiction is always with regard to a core behavior. It's not about a particular substance or any entity. It's rather how you are behaving towards it. What is your notion about it? How much of inability or to control that behavior is for you? You are taking alcohol once upon a time, maybe even daily. You want to stop it, you could just stop it. That is not addiction. But the moment you realize you can't stop it, you get problems, you don't feel good, and you start getting negative affective state, there the concept of addiction comes. Similarly, in pornography and associated masturbation, if they have to do it against their will, now it's not even as pleasurable. People do it because they just can't control it after a point of time. So then we have to talk about addiction. So how much is too much? Pornography use can be problematic and non-problematic. So initially in 2018, the prevalence was 3 to 6%. I was trying to look at if after COVID, did the prevalence increase drastically? There was no prospective study as such. However, the studies which were done after 2019, like this one from 2025, it's from it's from Iran. Yeah, it's from Iran, including men and women. It was an anonymous study, a cross-sectional study. They reported up to 30% of problematic porn use. Mind you, this is, again, I'm talking about problematic porn use. It's not about just porn uses. So more than 80% of people with hypersexuality have reported excessive problematic pornography uses. So hypersexuality and pornography are very much related, but they are not the same thing. So, but yeah, people who have hypersexual behavior, 80% of them do have problems with pornography consumption. High frequency of porn uses. So basically, there is a person, like I mentioned about alcohol, somebody who drinks daily, he can just stop it. But somebody who just drank for maybe a month, he's unable to stop it. So what is the difference? Why does it happen? So that's what a study also showed, that frequency of porn uses, it shows positive but very small to moderate association as with problematic porn uses, indicating that these two aspects of pornography use are related, but they may be actually distinct domains of pornography use. So basically, this big sentence means that you may be using porn quite often, but you may still not have problem with porn. The problem is only considered, I'm emphasizing it again and again, when you have inability to control it and when it is not pleasurable for you. Right. So, so what is the difference between problematic versus non-problematic porn users? How do you even understand that this is, maybe the patient does not have insight? There are many people who consume alcohol and they are like, no, I don't have any problem with alcohol, and everyone knows that they have problem with alcohol. So it was seen that there are few psychological differences. So we have some basic needs in our life. For example, we all want to be related